All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Doing that thing you do, breaking my heart into a million pieces, like you always do. And you don't mean to be cruel. You never even knew about the heartache I've been going through. Well, I try to forget you, girl, but it's just so hard to do. Every time you do that thing you do,
And good evening, one and all, and welcome all back to the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and for the next 2 hours, I'm going to be your host and your guide as together we're going to cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. And the X Zone comes to you Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. until midnight Eastern, right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And of course, we're also carried on Talkstar Radio and the Mutual Broadcast Network. One of our affiliates in St. Catharines, Ontario is Classic 1220 CFAJ AM. And in the state of Michigan, in Midland, Michigan, WVEX. Wow. First guest tonight is a gentleman I've had the pleasure of having on the show a number of times. He's always amazing me and our listeners. We're talking about Dr. Craig Hogan. We're going to be talking about afterlife studies, afterlife communication, and the nature of reality. And joining me now again is Dr. Hogan. And Dr. Craig, welcome back to the show, sir.
Hello, Rob. I'm delighted to be here. It's always fun to get on with you.
Oh, thank you. How have you been over the last couple of months since you and I last talked? You must be very busy these days.
Yeah, we're very busy. We're working on seekreality.com, and we're getting the word out about the afterlife and afterlife communication and the nature of reality. And we're really working hard at it, and we're having much success. We're having many people who are getting on board and understanding and asking the right questions. And so it's a delight to see that happening among the general public.
Tell me, Craig, how do we know what's real as in reality and what is basically a figment of our imagination?
Yeah, we've had a lot of overlay on our psyche.
Mm-hmm.
We had it first from the church, and then after that we had it from science. And they have kind of taken over everything having to do with the inner person, anything having to do with things like spirituality and psychic abilities and those sorts of things. And so we haven't gotten them back until recently. Now we're starting to reclaim them. We're starting to come back and say, even science, we can use science now to prove that this is true, that where there are psychic abilities, there are abilities that people have that are not explained by the physical realm.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that we live in the life after this life. So now we're reclaiming that territory, and we're helping people to realize the truth about it.
How did you get involved in this for the listeners who haven't been with us before, Craig? Because like you, we here at the X Zone are gathering more radio stations and more syndicates and so more satellite channels. So let our new listeners know who you are and how you got into doing that great work that you do.
Sure, I appreciate that. I have a background in business. I am a business communications professor, was a graduate level professor at the University of Pittsburgh and at the Illinois State University. And after a while, though, when I got into my 50s, which is the time many people say they have this kind of a realization.
Mm-hmm.
So I came into my 50s and I started meeting psychics. It seemed like they came out of the woodwork. Every place I turned, there was another psychic. And so then one psychic said to me, what you have psychic ability, you have psychometry ability. And so what you can do is go home, take a deck of cards, put it on one hand, and then take one card at a time,
right,
face down, and put it on your palm on the other hand. And then if it feels like it's warm, then it's red. If it feels like it's cold, then it's black. and start to make piles. And so I did that. I went home and did that, and I made 2 piles, and I ended up with about 25 or 30 cards. And when I turned over the ones that were too cold, that were to be black, that every one of them was black. When I turned over the ones that were to be warm, that were to red, everyone except one was red. So I found out that I have psychometry ability. I have the ability to be able to hold things and get messages about them. So after a while then, I started delving into it, and I got online and I found a phenomenon called remote viewing. And in remote viewing, a person sits in one location and looks at things through the psyche that are thousands of miles away. And so I found out that I could do that. I sat down and looked at the targets that were thousands of miles away, and before they showed the targets, I was able to sketch them. And so I found out that what we know about reality is very different. That taught me that what we see as space is not there. There is no space in the life that we have that's underneath this life, that's at the basis of this life. And that we can see things that are thousands of miles away, and psychics can know things about other people. So after that, then I've realized that, there must be something more to the life after this life. There must be something more to the end of life, because it seems like our minds are much greater than the physical realm. And so I started delving into the life after this life, the afterlife and afterlife communications, and that's what I devoted my life to now. We know so much more now than humankind has ever known. We've had things unveiled to us that humankind just didn't realize was true. And so we're taking back the territory from the church and from science, and we're saying that inner person, that inner self, is much greater, and we have the answers to what that inner self is like. And that's what I'm devoting my life to teaching people about now.
But how do we know for a fact that there is life after death, and that, life in one way or another continues after this mortal body is shed of its soul?
Yeah, we have many areas of evidence. One of them is, of course, near-death experiences. And what that does is the near-death experience is not the same thing as the death, of course. There are differences between near-death and actual death experiences. But what we find out from the near-death experience is that when the body shuts down, we go someplace. We are someplace else. And when the body is shut down, it's completely flatlined. There is no movement in the heart, and the brain is flatlined. But even in those circumstances, the person has greater sensitivity, understands things, sees things, can move into other areas, can float above the hospital. And we have the stories about people who've done this. And so what happens then when the brain is flatlined, then we then go on into the next life. And of course, we come back from a near-death experience. But we have the after-death experiences too, because we have people communicating to us through a great variety of means. And they tell us things about the life after this life and what happened to them during their transition from this life to the next. And so we've written now about 15 areas in particular. And we actually have one book that's devoted to each of the 15 areas. It's called Evidence Beyond Doubt That You Will Never Die. And it's available on Amazon. Anybody can look at it. But we now have the evidence, and this evidence is coming from people who are communicating to their loved ones and people who knew them on this side of life. So they can't fake that. And it's not something that a medium could know about the person. So they're communicating to individuals who are on this side of life and telling them things that no one could possibly know. And then in addition to that, they're telling them things about life after this life, what life is like there, and what the transition is like, and what happens immediately after the person leaves the body. So we're getting all this information, and it is proof beyond a reasonable doubt that we will continue to live after the body dies.
I've been doing some research myself about afterlife, especially in Egypt, because Egypt has always been a draw to me, Egyptology and so on. And in Egypt, the early Egyptians believed that the soul was broken up into 7 pieces or 7 parts. One part stayed in one realm so that it could communicate with those left on this planet or this realm, and the 6 other souls would travel on into new lives. Now, when we're talking about communicating with those on the other side, Craig, you mentioned mediums. Does somebody have to be a medium to communicate with the other side?
No, we can communicate with our loved ones. So we have a natural connection to the people who are close to us, whom we love. And that includes pets, and it certainly includes even unborn children. So we can communicate with those whom we love ourselves. And so we teach people how to do it. We have an online free training program that teaches people how to sit down in the comfort of their own living room and just have communication, just have conversations with their loved ones living in the afterlife. Anybody can do it. So the talent, the ability to do medium readings, which you're getting information about some other person, that takes a special talent. But it is a talent that is necessarily one that's acquired. It's something that they're born with. And so we can do, though, is we can teach people how to communicate with their loved ones. Everyone can do that. And we also have psychotherapists who are doing it. People are sitting in the psychotherapist's office, and they're having afterlife communications. We have hundreds of psychotherapists who are doing that now. And so what they're doing is they're using a method called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is for traumatic injuries, traumatic mental phenomena. And it is helping people to go into these afterlife communications. And so now 98% of the people who sit down with a psychotherapist and have this procedure can have their own afterlife communication while they sit in the psychotherapist's office.
Now, with some of these people, is it possible that they are generating their own will and their own desire, and that they're actually not communicating with the other side, even though they claim to be?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that people have to get over when they start to learn how to communicate with the afterlife. We have a tendency to think that because we've been private all of our lives, our minds are private. We've been private since we were infants, and nobody else knows what we're thinking. We can lie to somebody and they don't know it. And so we have this private area in our mind, and we think that area can't be intruded by any other person. And so people have to get over that. And the reason that we know that these are not just imagination or just the people who are wishing that they could have communication because their loved one is gone, the reason that we know that is because they come up with things that they couldn't have known. They come up with things that were not expected, and they're over and over again. We have information that comes to them, and they will expect one thing, and when they get in there and have the afterlife communication, they get something else. One of the stories that we have in a book that I co-authored with one of the psychotherapists, whose name is Allan Botkin, who was at the North Chicago VA hospital, and he was working with a combat vet. And the combat vet said that he was being disturbed. He was upset because of a soldier that was with him, and he saw the soldier die, and so he was very upset with the fact that he was feeling these feelings about it. And so Dr. Botkin put him into the state of mind in which he had an afterlife communication. And so he had a communication with that soldier, and that soldier was black, and the man was lily white. And what the man who was black said to him in his conversation while he was sitting in the psychotherapist's office was, "You didn't want anything to do with me when I was here on Earth. Why do you want to do something with me now?"
All right, Craig, we're going to have to have a little bit we're going to have to take a little bit of a cliffhanger here. I do have to take my hard break. And Exo Nation, our guest this hour is Dr. Craig Hogan, and if you'd like to find out more about Craig, visit his the website seekreality.com. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And you're listening to us around the world live on the Talkstar Radio Network and the Mutual Broadcast Network. Craig and I will be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
Said I was in my early 40s with a lot of life before me, when a moment came that stopped me on a dime. I spent most of the next days looking at the x-rays, talking about the options and talking about sweet time. I asked him when it sank in that this might really be the real end. How's it hit you? when you get that kind of news. Man, what you do? And he said, I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Blue Manchu. And I looked deeper and I spoke sweeter and I gave forgiveness I've been denying. And he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying.
Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Craig Hogan is my special guest, and we're talking this hour with Dr. Hogan about afterlife communication, afterlife studies, afterlife communication, and the nature of reality. For more information, visit Dr. Hogan's website at seekreality.com. According to the work that you've done, Dr. Hogan, what happens to us at the moment of death?
So what happens when we're released from the body? So the body then has to cease functioning. And the reason for that is because we have to have a reason for everything in this world. And so there's a reason that we're no longer here. We're no longer here. We're gone on to the next life. And to do that, then we have to have the body die. And so it goes through the phenomenon of having the body die. And at that point then, when the body is dying, we then are released from the body and we go on to the life after this life. And at that point, we feel no pain. There is no pain at the person's passing. So even if they were in a horrendous car accident and felt pain up to that point, at the point at which they actually do go through that experience and they are leaving the body, then they feel no pain and they're immediately into the life after this life. They say it's very easy. I was just here 1 minute and then I was there the next. I didn't know what happened and there I was. And so then after that happens, then they will come into the circumstances in which they'll discover that they're in the life after this life, and they'll have reunions with their loved ones, with their pets, with all of the people whom they love. There are no reunions. They don't have to see some people. If they don't want to see some people, they simply won't be there. But the other people they love are all going to be there. So we know this happens. We get this through hundreds of thousands of communications from the life after this life about what a wonderful reunion is when they get there.
Now, where is this place that they all go to after they leave here?
So it's not really a place in the sense of geography. It's rather like if we were thinking about something, if we were thinking about our mother at one instance, and then the next instance we were thinking about going bowling, and we just change focus. So we change from one thing to another, and the same thing is true when we go on from this life into the next life. We simply change focus. It's rather like we're looking at a waterfall, and then we turn around and we look at a mountain, and it's just that simple. We are still in the same place. There is no other place to where we go. There is no geography involved in it. But when we go into the life after this life, then it becomes the environment that is much like the earth. There are rivers and streams, and there are streets and buildings, and there are places where people gather, and all of the wonderful things that we love about this life. So then the reality there becomes real because we've changed our focus to that reality. So right now we're focused on the earth realm. We just go out of focusing on the earth realm and we focus on the next life, which is called Summerland by many. And so then it's just a matter of change of focus. It has nothing to do with being in a geographical location.
You said that we could communicate with our pets that have passed in Summerland. Can we also have sex in Summerland?
Yes.
Wow.
So we've been told that repeatedly, that we can, if you want to, you can eat things, you can drink, you can smoke, you can have sex, all of those things that you enjoyed on this side of life. If you want to have them, they're simply available. They're simply there.
Wow.
And so if you wanted to have sex, then the partners would be available to you. There's one really interesting story that is told about a guy who had gone into the life after this life, and he communicated back and said that he was just so hungry for sex, and so then he had many partners, and after a while he just got tired of it, and then he left it, and then he had it no more. But he had the opportunity to have as many partners as he wanted. But it's the same as on this side of life. You have to meet people. They have to be interested in you. They have to want to be with you. All of the same things, exactly the same way as they are on this side of life.
Can people on the other side get pregnant?
No.
No.
So there's no pregnancy. There are no old people. There are no diseases. There are no hospitals, no physicians, no any of those things. There are none of those in the life after this life. But there are children who come into the next life. The children who come in can be the children who were very young. So a 1-year-old or 5-year-old, they come into the next life, and there are special areas for children. And their loved ones, the relatives who are already there, then they visit them and take them home and spend time with them. And these special areas are just wonderful areas full of other children and animals that they love, and so they can go to these special areas. But we also know that the young people who were not born are also in the life after this life if they were loved by the mother. So a child that was aborted or that was miscarried, if they were loved by the mother before they were born, then they are born in the afterlife, and they grow up there, and people then have wonderful reunions with their loved ones that they didn't even realize they had, because they thought, well, that was just an abortion. But they grow up there, and we have wonderful stories. We have one story of a woman who went into the afterlife, and she communicated back to us, and we have her actual recorded statements. And she reported back to us, and she said she met her 2 children, Sybil and Peter, and she didn't realize she had children, and it was because of the fact that they had been miscarriages. But the children do grow up there in the afterlife.
All right, you were saying that if a mother loved the child, that they would be
Yes.
there. But how can a mother love a child and have the child aborted? That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it would be because of necessity. So in other words, then a woman has an abortion because of
Let's
the
say she was
difficulties
raped,
with
yeah.
the family,
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was saying if she had been raped, or if it was
Yeah,
yeah.
it could have been all kinds of things. So, but if the woman then decided to have an abortion, or had to have an abortion for some reason, but she just really loved that child, she would have wanted to have that child, she would have loved that child, then that child is going to be born in the life after this life, and it's going to grow up there, and she's going to have a reunion with that child when she gets there.
Now, who decides at what age this person is going to, for example, I die tonight, I go to Summerland. Who decides at what age I'm going to appear to my relatives and everybody else up there?
People who are already there in Summerland. Yeah, you're going to be the same age that you are now. So a child is going to be a child, be a 5-year-old, be a 10-year-old. If we go, you and I'm an old guy, and when we go there, we're going to be in our 20s or 30s. So we're going to have the bodies that we had in our 20s or 30s. I know it sounds crazy. It sounds like a fairy tale. It is not. It is because of the fact that we desire that. And what we want out of life is really very important, much more important than we realize. That we are a part of our universal intelligence, which some would say the source, others would say that's God, but it isn't God. It is separate from us. Everything is God. There is nothing but God. So our universal intelligence gives us what we most desire out of life. And then because of the fact that we would desire having a body in our 20s or 30s, then that's what we have when we go into the next life.
All right, let's say somebody passes, they go to Summerland, they're back in their 20s. Where does reincarnation fit in all this?
Reincarnation is really misunderstood, and we're just beginning to realize the truths about reincarnation. In conversations, everything that I say, everything that we get is from people living in the afterlife. None of this is from a religion or a guru or our best guesses about what it's like. Everything is from a communication from the afterlife. And what they say to us is that we stay the individuals we are throughout eternity. We do not come back as some other individual. But what happens is that our higher self, which is a self that we're part of, when our higher self has other people coming back into the earth realm. And those people that are coming back into the earth realm may take a framework or a slice from our lives, a lesson we didn't learn or something that we wish that we had done. And then they will enact that. They will live that out in this life. So we are intertwined with them then. They are part of us because it's a framework from our life that they're taking. And that's where past life regressions come from. So a past life regression or a reincarnation experience in which a person actually has the physical manifestations of reincarnation. These are coming from the intertwined nature. But we're told very, very strongly from those on the other side that we remain individuals. We do not then become somebody else. I won't become an Inuit Eskimo with 13 children. That just does not happen. We will stay the individuals we are. And we have the reports of people who've been there in Summerland for thousands of years. They just don't feel like they want to go anyplace else. And they stay individuals, though. And we've had communication from people living in the 4th century BC. And we've had people who have come from the 1st century, from the Roman Empire. So we stay as individuals. We know that that's true now, and we're just helping people to understand that truth.
You and I have to take a break very shortly, Craig, but when I come back, I'd like to talk to you about our life plan, and just continuing on the part of the discussion of Summerland. Does time stop in Summerland?
No, there is a time, but it's a different kind of time. So the time that there's no sun, there's no moon, there are no seasons, and as a result of that, then time is very different in Summerland, and people don't keep track of birthdays and those sorts of things. They will come to us when we're celebrating a birthday, because they're getting our thoughts all the time. So they will come back to Earth when we're having an anniversary party or a celebration, and because of the fact that they want to be close to us during that time. But they don't notice those things. They don't celebrate any birthdays and so forth there. But there is a sense of time. Things do pass, and we learn things. We do have a past, and we do have a future that we look forward to in the next life. So there is a time, but it's a different sort of time.
All right, you and I will take that break now. Exo Nation, if you'd like to get more information about the topic that we're talking about tonight, and that is afterlife studies, afterlife communication, and the nature of reality, please feel free to visit www.seekreality.com, and also go to Amazon, books that is, and check out books by Dr. Hogan. Craig Hogan, that's the name. And we'll be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away.
Said I was in my early 40s with a lot of life before me, when a moment came that stopped me on a dime. I spent most of the next days looking at the x-rays, talking about
When you were young and your heart was an open book, you used to say, live and let live. But if this ever-changing world in which we live in makes you give in and cry, say live and let die.
Dr. Craig C. Hogan is our special guest of this hour, Exonation. You can always find out more about Craig and the great work that everyone at Seek Reality does just by going to their website at www.seekreality.com. And if you'd like to check out all the programming that we do here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, we just don't do the X-Zone Radio TV show, but we also have a different perspective with Kevin Randall. We also have, Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka, and many other great shows. And the best part is you can go to www.xzbn.net, and they're all there for you with our compliments and the compliments of our hosts. That's www.xzbn.net. Craig, it seems that the afterlife, as we're learning about it, seems to be a lot more complicated than the religious aspect and the religious view of death.
Yeah, there's much more to it. If you ask people what the afterlife is like, who they're strong Christians, they won't be able to tell you. They won't really have a good answer to that. There are some mythologies about people sitting around strumming harps and worshiping God all day and those sorts of things. And they really don't have any notion of what the afterlife is like. So when they find out, then it does become much more complicated. It's a whole world. It's like we're looking into another universe. And of course, there are different things. There are different ways that things happen and different experiences in this other world. And so it is very complicated, but it's much more wonderful. So everything that we know about the life after this life is just mind-blowing, and it's a wonderful experience. And so that's what we're trying to help people to understand now and get away from the religions and the idea of strumming harps on clouds all day long.
All right, but I would just like to try and understand that. Is the reality of Summerland real, or is it part of our psyche?
Yeah, it is very real. It is as real as this world is. Now, in this world, the earth realm, then we realize that everything about this world is matter and energy, and matter is just slowed down energy. So at the basis, it is simply energy. So when we get down into the nitty-gritty of this realm, there is just energy in different forms. And so this world is not so substantial as people think that it is. And the afterlife, though, is substantial. It is solid. It is just like this world. It is the basis of it is the same kind of a basis of energy, and the same kinds of things are happening. It's just a different world, a different realm, a different focus. But it is a real world. It's very much substantial. We have bodies just as we have here. They're in their 20s or 30s, and there are no blemishes or defects, or never worried about getting old or old people ailments. They just don't exist there.
All right, I understand that you have a lot of communications that is being taken as the proof of this. But there's no physical proof, is there?
Yeah, we have physical proof as well, but the physical proof isn't that something you can put in a museum, and everybody can come and take a look at it. It is physical proof. We've had people who've materialized and spoken to people living on this side of life. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was voted one of the 20th century's most influential women, had the experience in which she was walking down the hallway of the hospital. She was about to leave her profession of working on death and dying. She was a specialist in death and dying, but she was frustrated about the fact that people wouldn't listen. They were treating her like she was a woo-woo nonsense person, and she was about to leave. And so as she walked down the hallway, a woman came up to her and said, "Dr. Kubler-Ross, do you mind if I walk down the hallway and sit down with you for a minute?" And so she walked down the hallway with this woman to her office, and she said it was the longest walk of her life, because she knew that the woman standing next to her, walking next to her, was Mrs. Schwartz, a patient of hers who had died 2 years before. So she went down with her, and they sat in the office, and Mrs. Schwartz said,
Right.
"Dr. Kubler-Ross, I want to thank you for everything you did for me, and you mustn't leave death and dying now. You have to stay with it. We will help you." And so then after they had a long conversation, then the woman got up, went out the door and closed the door, and she ran to the door. Kubler-Ross ran to the door to see if there was anybody out there, and there was not a soul in that long hallway. So we do have substantial things. We have things that happen to people in which they experience the people whom they knew coming into our lives, and it happens in our dreams. It happens.
Yeah, I understand that,
waking
Greg.
us.
I understand that with the example you just gave us. But that was that person saying that she had that experience. Was it witnessed by anybody else?
Yeah, well, for Dr. Kubler-Ross, you wouldn't expect. I mean, she is above reproach. There is no doubt about the fact that she was telling the truth. She had the woman, Mrs. Schwartz, write a note, and to be able to give to a colleague of hers, and she made that up, of course, because she just wanted the note. And so she had the note. She had the note from her, and then she testified to the fact that she had this conversation with Mrs. Schwartz. And another person who had it was J.B. Phillips, the translator of the New Testament, and he had C.S. Lewis come into his room and sit down and talk with him. Lewis had been dead for months. So we have these testimonials from people who we can rely upon them. Their testimonies are real, and that's the evidence that we have.
Okay, so earlier you were telling us that you have communications from way back in history. I believe you talked about Romans and you talked about 4 BC. Are all of those people in Summerland?
Yes, they are. And some of them have gone on, but then they come back to speak with us. But they begin their life in the life after this life in Summerland, and there they grow spiritually. They grow in maturation and their intellect and their spirit, and then they go on to the next levels. They go on to the higher levels, but they all begin in Summerland. Those who come back to us, and sometimes there are people who are at very high levels who come back to us, and we have many stories about Jesus coming down and speaking to people, and these coming from a much higher level, and so we do know that they can come from any level that they're on. Most of them now, when they first go over, are going to be in Summerland for the first few decades or perhaps centuries.
All right, you were saying that, the life after studies and the information that you have received from many of the people of the testimonies kind of dispel the religious aspect of life and death. So if we put the religious aspect of life and death aside, Craig, how do we bring Jesus into it?
Yeah, we know that we have received communications from Jesus through a number of people, and we know for a fact that he was a real person, that he lived then in the 1st century CE, and that what the legends that we have, the transcripts that we have of what he had said that are now in the Gospels, they're all true. They were spoken by this person who was a real person, whose name was Yeshua bar Yosef, and his name was then transliterated into Jesus later on. But he was a real person, and what he said was he tried to help humankind to change itself. He gave messages to humankind, and he was actually, at first, he was giving them to the Jewish community because he was a Jew. He was part of the Jewish community, and so he was giving these messages about how to treat other people, how to live your life, what to look forward to in the life after this life. Most of his message then was corrupted by the church, so that it was changed, but we're coming back to realizing what his real message was. Now, he was not a god. That part of the atonement, that part of the mythology that grew up around him was not true, but he was a real person, and he had a real mission in life, and he accomplished his mission. And today we're just beginning to come back to what he taught, to understand the wisdom that he had taught, that he was helping humanity to grow.
So if Jesus is real, and you have the testimonies of that by people who participate in afterlife studies and who have given you these testimonies, how do we know that the rest of the Bible is not true and that the Bible is, in fact, the real McCoy?
Yeah, we're not saying that the Bible is true. That's the difference. What we're saying is that Jesus and his teachings, they were then distilled into the Bible. So the Bible is not all of his teachings, and there are some of the things that are in the Bible that crept in that were not his teachings. But we know for the fact that what we have that is distilled out of the Bible then is his teachings. Now, that doesn't mean that the Bible is breathed by God.
Right.
That doesn't mean that the Old Testament and the New Testament are now sacrosanct and you must obey the commands in the New Testament and the Old Testament. It only means that we have that glimmer. We have those words that were spoken by Jesus. And then those words, which are very wise and would make a difference for humankind if humankind followed them, can make a difference. And all we have to do then is to go into the Gospels, pull out those words that he had said, take that apart from the rest of the Bible and just accept those not as inspired truth, but as words of wisdom that came from a real man who was brought with a message to humankind.
Was he crucified on a cross?
We don't know that. I mean, it seems like historically that could have been true because of the fact that we have that in the Gospels, and there are some truths that are in the Gospels of events, but we don't know for sure whether that was true or not. And there was in the early church, in the early Christian church, there were those who did not believe that he was crucified. So that was not something which was held throughout the communities.
But wouldn't it be
that were
easy enough for
developing.
somebody who knows how to communicate with those in the afterlife to actually ask Jesus those questions to get clarification?
Nobody's done it. I think it's a good idea. I think that somebody could do that. Everybody's more concerned about his teachings, what he's bringing to us. There's not so much of a dialogue. And what I've heard or what I've read about these communications from the higher order beings, that they don't ask questions like that, like what really happened in your life, and did you marry anybody when you were in your life, and they just don't ask those questions. Those are not important. What's important is the teachings.
Well, I know why I don't do that now, because I'd ask all those questions.
Well,
I'd ask for clarification. I'd ask for proof. But
yeah.
that's just me. We'll be back on the other side of this break as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone with our guest this hour, Craig C. Hogan. And if you'd like more information on the afterlife studies, www.seekreality.com.
Say, live and let live. But if this ever-changing world in which we live in makes you give in and cry, say, live and let die.
Dr. Craig C. Hogan is my special guest this hour, Exonation. His website is www.seekreality.com. And don't forget, you can listen to all the great programming we have available for you, 725, where did that come from? 365, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, at www.xzbn.net. That's www.xzbn.net. Craig, Summerland must be this massive place, or is it because it's strictly energy, it's not very big at all?
Yeah, so what they say to us is that there are millions of planes and spheres, so that Summerland is just one, and that there are millions of others. Because of the fact that we're in the Earth realm right now, we go on there because of the fact that it's like the Earth realm, and all of our loved ones and the other people who have come from the Earth realm are there. So Summerland is uniquely suited to us. And even within Summerland, though, there are different areas. For instance, there are places that are for the people who were Chinese in the first century, for instance, and they're comfortable in those places. So they live with each other there. And so there are other different places, people who lived in arid areas, who are then comfortable in what they found there because that area is suitable to them. So it depends upon who the person was in this life, what their environment was like, what they expect life to be, what they would love to have life to be. That's what life is like in Summerland. But there are millions of other Summerlands.
Yeah. What about the people who aren't as fortunate as we are? Let's take the people in Ethiopia. Let's take the people in the drought-ridden countries where there is no food and people are dying because they're hungry or they're thirsty. Where do they go? Because they don't know the pleasure of life as we do.
Yeah, what life is going to be like for them is it's going to be in the ideal conditions of what it would have been like if life had been good in those areas. And so there are none of the difficulties, there are none of the problems that people have in their life during this time. So they don't carry those difficulties into the next life. So it is an ideal circumstance that they would expect to have, that they would love to have if they had been able to choose. And so that life is simply there. It's because of the fact that they want it. It's simply mental. It is something that they expect to have, and so it's simply there.
What about people like Adolf Hitler? Does he go to Summerland?
But that will happen with people who are at a lower level, a lower state of mind. The people who are violent and self-absorbed and they are harsh to other people and cruel. They live in a lower area called the lower realms, and those areas are not as pleasant. The light is dimmer there. There are screams and shouts, and people are doing things to each other the same way they would on Earth. And so then it is just not a pleasant place to live. It is smelly but the reason that they're there is not a punishment. It is not a hell. There is no such place as hell. There never was a place like hell. But these lower realms are there because of their state of mind. In other words, they're creating that out of their state of mind in the same way that what we expect that we would love to have. If we would love to have food, we can eat. If we'd love to have drink, we can drink. In the same way, because of the fact that their state of mind is low, they are cruel and they are violent. And because their state of mind is that way, they create that realm. So they're creating that lower realm and they're living in it together. But they're given help to raise out of that. They don't stay there. They will eventually rise out of that, but they have to mature in their spirit. They have to mature in their love and ability to have compassion and to get rid of the violence that was in their lives. Once they do that, then they'll rise up out of that. So we would expect that Adolf Hitler, if he is of the state of mind in which he is cruel and violent and manipulative, then he would be in the lower realms. Then other people who are similar to him would also be there with him, and they would all be in the same circumstances, but they can come out of that if they just raise themselves out of it.
Now, everybody knows that humans are fallible. We all make mistakes. There's no one perfect here on this planet. So how can Summerland be so perfect?
Yeah, there is no judgment. There is no condemnation. So whatever we have done on this side of life is not held. We are not held accountable for it. It's only who we are, what's in our spirit. So if a person is violent and they're cruel and they're self-absorbed and they don't have any regard for other people, they carry that in their spirit, regardless of what they did while they were on the earth realm. And so then they carry that into the next realm, and then they will act like that and they will be like that until they rise up out of that.
What have members of the clergy said about the afterlife studies and the information that you've received from the other side?
More and more of them are coming around to realizing the truth of it. We have statements by the churches, by the leaders of the churches, some of even the Roman Catholic Church, about the fact that the communication with the people living in life after this life is valid, and that we can expect that we will have these communications, we'll understand what life is like there. The churches in general, other than the fundamentalist churches, the churches in general are beginning to realize that they don't have a portrayal of what life is like in their scriptures. And we have the portrayal of what life is like, and so we fill in the gaps in what their beliefs are, and they then are coming around to realizing that what is in the Bible, what's in the Gospels, is what is true about the life after this life, and about how people treat each other there. They are loving and compassionate, and there is no malice and no cruelty and no difficulties, and that's what the churches say they'd like to have. That's what they're saying that is the ideal circumstance. And so then they are beginning to embrace that. So we have many more of the church leaders who are embracing it.
So is it possible that the only reason the Bible is so different and the ways that were talked about in the Bible were so different than what we look at today in Summerland is because at that time those who wrote the Bible really had no concept of the real world around them, and that they just wrote about what they thought they knew. And yet here we are, so many hundreds of years later, we have a total different outlook, and science and math and physics and all the other great work that have been done by educators over the years to get us where we are today. If the Bible were to be written today, I'm sure it would be totally different from when it was way back when.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true, because it was written by tribal cultures. You have to remember that was 2 millennia ago. So that was quite a long time ago, and they were tribal people, and so much of what is certainly in the Old Testament especially, that's a tribal culture who has Yahweh, who is a vengeful God, a jealous God, and a God who will slay. The estimate is that God in the Old Testament slew 25 million people. But that's a different God, because it was a tribal culture. So it is true. If the Bible were written today, then it would be very different. But the Bible is being written in a sense. So we are writing the Bible now based upon what we're receiving from people living in the life after this life. So we're writing about what the truth is about our universal intelligence, which some people would call God, about our relationships to each other, about what happens in the life after this life. All these things that we now know to be true, we're putting them into our scriptures, the work that we're doing, but they're not Holy Writ. They're not written by the Holy Spirit. And so that's a real difference in our outlook on what it is that we're writing. We're writing about what people in the afterlife are telling us.
No, if I understand what you're saying, you're writing about what people tell people who tell you about what happens in the afterlife.
Yeah, we're receiving the testimonies from the people who are living there. And we receive them directly. For instance, I am able to communicate with people in my family, and they tell me things about the life after this life. And I've been in situations in seances in which we have people come through and they describe what life is like in the afterlife. And so we have firsthand accounts by the people who are living there. And they're just wonderful accounts. They're uplifting, and they also are consistent across all of the people who are speaking. So we know that this is the real world that they're talking about, and so we can rely upon that.
What about people in other parts of the world, for example, in China, in India, Pakistan, throughout the African continent? Do we find the same thing there as well?
Yes, they are communicating as well in the same way. And consistently, they're finding out the same things. So regardless of what the culture is, they're finding out in the testimonies that we're receiving from their people who are living in the life after this life. They're saying exactly the same things. There's a consistency among them all. So that's the reason that we know that these things are true.
Craig, how come this afterlife studies isn't as well known as other forms of philosophy?
It's very recent. We haven't really started studying the afterlife and after the end of this life and what happens at the transition. So that's just very recent. And in fact, it really is in the second half of the 20th century and into the 21st century that we're just really now discovering all of these things. We're getting the records, and now we have mass communication, so we can share them among each other. And so somebody finds out something from contact that they have in the afterlife, and they share that with other people. And so now that what we're writing, what is coming about now and is coming into fruition, is much stronger, much more prominent, much more reliable than we have ever known, and that humankind has ever known. And so now we're just beginning to really realize what life is like in the afterlife and what the end of this life is like.
Sounds like utopia.
It is, yeah. So nobody need fear the end of this life. It's a simple transition. It is a very easy transition. There is no pain of the transition. And immediately after the transition, then we have a reunion with our loved ones who are there to greet us. So it really is a wonderful message.
Craig, I want to thank you ever so much for joining us. Please give my best to Roberta as well, and X Zone Nation if you'd like to find out more about Dr. Craig Hogan. And Roberta Grimes as well. Visit seekreality.com. I'll be back on the other side of this short break as hour number 2 of tonight's X Zone continues, right here from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and Talkstar Radio Network. Don't go away.
Wandering aimlessly,